Hey everyone, Trace here. Just wanted to let you know that Joe stuck his finger in an electrical socket this week and it tweaked his audio just a bit, so you may hear some static on his end. Also, my regular recording studio was unavailable to me this week, so you may hear my dogs in the background drinking water, eating food, and doing other things to survive. Apologies for this inconvenience, but Joe and I hope that this won't be too troublesome to your listening experience. Anyway, thank you for your patience and back to the show. Also, Joe didn't really stick his finger in an electrical socket.
God, I loved it. I'll send you a copy. Bam! Bitch went down.
Welcome back to Horror Queers. We are talking external wombs. We're talking psychosomatic pussy things. I'm grossed out. I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and I'm grossed out too, but I love this fucking movie.
Yes. I mean, how could you not?
Well, some people, when it came out, didn't like it.
That is bullshit, but also that question was rhetorical because the only right answer is that people have to love this fucking movie.
Yeah. We'll get into the reception in just a little bit, though. Joe, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about The Brood. We're talking about David Cronenberg's The Brood, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. So...
Yep, and we are revisiting Cronenberg, and if you have been a loyal listener of this podcast, you know that this is the second film of his we've done. We did cover Dead Ringers a couple months ago, although we are on level playing ground in this episode because I have seen this movie before. However, when it comes to the behind-the-scenes knowledge, I'm probably not as into it as you are, but that's okay, because I'm sure you're going to tell me everything you know.
For sure. And I'm not going to go into things quite as deeply as I did during Dead Ringers, so I would encourage people, if you have not listened to that, and our statistics prove that many of you have not, you may want to go back and revisit that one because it's a good primer for some things Cronenbergian, although, yes, we will still address many of the various things that you might be interested to know as a scholar of the Cronenberg.
Yes, and on that note, I did post not the exact download numbers, but I posted a chart just showing how all of our episodes were doing compared to the others. And yeah, Dead Ringers and Swim Fan are some of our least downloaded episodes. And I'm very hurt by that because Swim Fan, I think, is one of our funniest.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I would say that Dead Ringers is probably one of our more educational ones. So
no, it totally is. I mean, I wouldn't say it was dry, but it definitely is like no, but it's definitely.
I'm not saying
no.
It. Others might say.
Yeah, no. No, it's just more of an academic, educational episode than it is more of a fun riffing episode. This one, sure. I think, might be a mix of both.
I think so, yeah.
We're gonna see.
Lots of stuff to talk about, despite the fact that this is a very brief movie, all things considered.
I was shocked by that. I've seen this movie twice before, so this is my third time watching it. When I saw it was 92 minutes on my Criterion Blu-ray, my mouth dropped. I was like, what? Because I remember it being longer, but it's not, and it is very quick.
It is, yeah. It's kind of brief. It's actually fairly streamlined, and yet I would argue, much like Calvert, there's a lot of things going on here that if you want to do the work, you could dig into.
Yeah, for sure. But I will confess, I didn't watch a commentary. I didn't watch behind-the-scenes shit. I didn't really do a lot of research. So I'm going to go into this as a dummy.
Fair enough.
Okay. So, yes, we are discussing David Cronenberg's The Brood, which was released on May 25th, 1979. I believe that was the U.S. release date, though. I think it came out like a week earlier in Canada. No, that was the Canadian release date. It was a week later in Canada. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's a Canadian film.
Yes. It's actually the first of a 2-week Canadian film extravaganza that we're going to continue next week.
Woohoo! It was made on a budget of 1.2 million American dollars, which is 1.5 million Canadian dollars at the time. I'm assuming that gap might be a little bigger today. I don't know. You're the currency expert.
Our currency has remained exactly the same.
Okay. The American distributor is New World Pictures. I don't have any box office information for this movie except for the fact that apparently it was financially successful. I couldn't find any numbers on the box office.
Yeah, that is a little bit strange, but we are talking about now a 40-year-old movie, so...
Yeah, but I mean, like, this is the year after Halloween. You got Halloween's numbers in Box Office Mojo. I don't know. Whatever, not important. It was successful, and, whatever. You're looking at a Rotten Tomato score, which, again, with these, is kind of like take with a grain of salt, because I feel like it's like half contemporaneous and half modern reviews. I don't know. But
Right.
80% on Rotten Tomatoes, which pretty strong given what we're working with. But the audience score is 68%. And yeah, but that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I would think so too. As actually, I think we discussed during the Dead Ringers episode, Cronenberg is definitely the kind of filmmaker who's going to skew more towards critically acclaimed, and he's, shall we say, a bit more of a hard sell for regular audiences.
Yeah, no, 100%. Metacritic, you're looking at a 63 out of 100, which, again, that makes more sense. But that's going to have your more, like, you know, high-profile critic reviews as opposed to the, you know, more modern online critic reviews. So, yeah, I mean, again, reception's all over the place. I think right now, though, I mean, again, it's in the Criterion Collection. So, I mean, I'm fairly certain this movie is considered, like, if not one of the greatest films ever made, one of Cronenberg's best films.
For sure. I think it's one of only 2 to make it into that.
What's the other one?
I believe Scanners, surprisingly enough.
I think you're right, but I mean, as we discussed in Dead Ringers, Scanners is not one of my favorite films of his.
No, to be honest, I would argue it's one of the more accessible of his early films for audiences, which is maybe one of the reasons that Criterion would put it on, because they would say, oh, okay, this is a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of someone describing Scanners as a crowd pleaser.
It's got that exploding head, which is funny because people always think that there's so many exploding heads in Scanners, and it's like, no, man, there's like
2.
There's like 2.
Yeah. Yeah, so written and directed by David Cronenberg, not surprising. And again, if you didn't listen to Dead Ringers, he directed Dead Ringers. He also directed Scanners. And he directed Videodrome, The Fly, or if you didn't go into his early shit, you can also look up A History of Violence or Eastern Promises, or maybe avoid his really recent shit, which people don't seem to care about, like Maps to the Stars and Cosmopolis.
Cosmopolis is interesting, particularly if you're one of those people who think that Robert Pattinson can't act. That's a good way to prove yourself wrong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would go on it. I haven't seen it, but I don't think he can't act. I mean, I've seen him in some things where I'm like, all right, cool. But he's not one of those actors where, like, his presence in a film makes me want to seek it out and see it, you know?
No. But there's a bunch of people who will actively not seek out a film because he is in it, and I think that's usually a mistake.
Do you have any of those actors that are like that?
I don't like Julia Roberts.
Oh, that's really... I don't have any female actresses that are like that. But...
Why? Who's yours?
Matthew McConaughey. I hate him.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't love him.
Even though... I mean, he's not going to make me not go see it. Like, I went to go see Serenity this year, but that was for Anne Hathaway. Right. But, like, I don't want to see The Beach Bum because I don't like him, and I don't like Harmony Korine.
As we've talked about.
Yeah. Russell Crowe's another one where I don't particularly, like, his presence in a movie kind of makes me not want to see it, unless it's already about something that I do want to see.
Interesting. Out of curiosity, is it the actor, or is it, like, the type of performance that they're giving, or a bit of both?
No, I think it's the actor. This is really weird, but like, so my dad doesn't like him because he apparently read in a magazine once that Russell Crowe had BO, and so I literally grew up just every time Russell Crowe was on screen, my dad was like, you know, he has BO, and
that is too funny and so specific.
That's body odor, in case you don't know what I'm talking about. So it's not even him hitting someone with a phone; it's the fact that I think he smells, apparently.
And yet, very on topic, considering that The Brood is actually all about, like, nature versus nurture. So clearly you were brought up in an environment that encouraged you to think that Russell Crowe has BO, and it has affected you all the way into adulthood.
You're the best co-host because you always get me back on track when I just jump off the rails. Yeah, and so that's kind of the basic gist. In terms of actors and actresses, not anyone I'm super familiar with, but they are, I mean, again, there's only a handful. You got Oliver Reed as Dr. Raglan, who...
I was going to say, you don't know Oliver Reed?
Dude, I don't.
Okay.
But
I mean, I can't say that I'm a huge fan or anything, but he's kind of a legacy actor.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like, and I remember, because he was in Gladiator with Russell Crowe, and he famously died during the production of that movie.
Oh my god, it's all coming full circle. Much like this film.
Yes. But I mean, apparently he was in The Who's Tommy, which I've never seen. He was in The Three Musketeers from 1973. He was in Oliver! The musical.
You betcha.
And then Nola, who is my favorite character in this movie, was played by Samantha Eggar, famous for Dr. Dolittle, a movie called, the original Dr. Dolittle, The Uncanny, The Dead Are Alive. But what I know her from, she voices Hera in Disney's animated Hercules.
Ah.
I thought that was really fun. And then the guy that plays Frank is Art Hindle, who is in Black Christmas.
Art Hindle is also in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 78 remake, and he's in Porky's, which is a total seminal teen, like, it's the American Pie of its day.
I've seen the first one, but I mean, it's not very good. None of them are good.
No, none of them are, but they're very important to certain people.
For sure. I've also never seen any iteration of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, except for The Faculty, if you even want to count that.
Oh, yeah. I would call it that.
Yeah. So, Joe, what is The Brood about?
Okay, so, The Brood. So we start with Frank Carveth, who is Art Hindle. He opens the film briefly attending a psychoplasmic session / performance at the Soma Free Institute before collecting his daughter Candace, who is played by Cindy Hines. Well, arguably.
And it played by, like, in quotes. She's just there standing and, like, making no facial expressions whatsoever.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Okay, we learn that Frank and his wife Nola Egger are going through marital issues, that Nola is staying at the Institute to be treated by Dr. Hal Raglan, Oliver Reed, and that Frank is apprehensive about the intensive role-playing performances that encourage the physical manifestation of trauma on the body. So he's not a big fan of the Soma Free Institute. So during their sessions, Dr. Raglan coaxes out details about Nola's past, and it's revealed that she blames her mother, Juliana, for physically abusing her as a child, and she also blames her father for allowing it to happen. And in short order, both parents are brutally bludgeoned to death by deformed children-like monsters. Frank manages to capture one, and an autopsy reveals that it is an immature organism that can only live for a brief period of time, amongst many other things, like it, has no genitals, and they can only see in black and white, so on. After Nola inadvertently confuses Candace's teacher, Ruth Mayer, played by Susan Hogan, for Frank's mistress, the teacher is killed by a pair of monsters at school, and Candace is kidnapped. Frank desperately tracks them back to the institute where Dr. Raglan confines that the creatures are the byproduct of Nola's treatment. Frank confronts her as Dr. Raglan attempts to smuggle Candace out of the attic, which is guarded by more than half a dozen of what we come to call them the Brood. The action intercuts between Frank and Nola and Dr. Raglan's attempted rescue. Nola reveals an external womb from which she bursts the creatures, delicately biting and licking a newborn in front of a horrified Frank. Dr. Raglan is murdered, and Candace is nearly attacked until Frank strangles Nola to death, thereby breaking the psychic connection she has to the Brood. The film ends as Frank and Candace drive away, and it is revealed that the little girl has her own psychoplasmic symptoms, a pair of warts or blisters on her hand, suggesting that the cycle will continue.
I actually forgot about that. I mean, do we want to call it a cliffhanger ending? Like, whatever, that ending. I totally forgot that it showed that it was on the girl.
Mm-hmm. It's a nice little tease, right? Because there's the suggestion earlier in the film, before Juliana, the mother, is killed, that one of the reasons that Nola was frequently in the hospital was because she herself had these kinds of
welts,
like warts or blisters or welts and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's so funny hearing you describe the plot of this movie because it sounds so fucking bizarre. It's so weird, and it's so. I actually only heard about this movie because, as call back to Cemetery Man, I have one of those 101 horror movies to see before you die books, and this was in there, and I'd never heard of it before. I mean, again, this is like probably 10 years ago, and so I sought it out immediately because I was like, what? Like this fucking little dwarf children like going after people? Oh, that sounds awesome. And it is.
And it is. But it's funny, right? Because it's not surprising to me that you had forgotten about that ending scene, because I think when you mention this film, there's two things that come to mind for people, and everybody forgets about nearly everything else. So people think about the Brood and like the physical look of them. So children in parkas or like ski suits. Mm-hmm. And obviously that reveal scene, it's infamous. Like when Nola pulls up that dress and there's an external wound, you're just like, what the fuck is that?
Well, and it's so, yes, it's so freaky. And so we're to believe that she's had that the entire time, right? Because that's how she births the Brood. Like,
yes.
And the doctor knew that the entire time.
Yes, but remember that many of the scenes that we see of him and her working through their therapy sessions, you get the impression that they're so isolated, they really don't have any kind of concept of what's happening. So to me, it's always a bit of a surprise when Frank shows up at the center and Dr. Raglan's like, yeah, so she's been like birthing these little things. And you're like, dude, you knew about this? What the fuck?
Well, that's what I didn't know, though, if he knew about it the whole time or if like he deduced it after like, after her dad died, you know, so, like these murders are happening during our sessions.
Well, I don't think that he knew that they were murderous. I think he knew that she was birthing something because that's why he's so proud of her, right? Because she's the ultimate demonstration that his experimental, like bullshitty therapeutic performance art works.
The climax of this movie is fucking phenomenal. I love everything about it. It's so suspenseful. It's so gross. It's whatever. But maybe we're burying the lead. And so we should start at the beginning.
Okay. So what was your initial impression when you first watched this movie? Like, were you bored by it the first time? Were you engrossed in it? Like, what were your...
No, I was definitely engrossed, but it's one of those things, like, I find different versions of psychotherapy very fascinating, and I'm not well-read in it, I'm not an expert or anything, but I just, when it's portrayed in film, like, I'm very interested in looking at other, like, at different types of therapy. Now, of course, this one, psychoplasmics, does not exist, to my knowledge.
Not a real one, nope.
But it's... I mean, the first scene of the movie is you have Raglan talking to this guy who's been, I mean, I guess abused by his father for being too feminine.
Yes.
Which, I mean, we're to believe he's gay, right?
I mean, you could definitely read it that way, or you could infer that his father treated him like a little girl.
Gotcha. And then he's also covered in, like, cuts and shit. So are we to believe that that is a byproduct of the therapy, or that he does it to himself, or what is that?
No, so if you watch the scene closely, the wounds that he has, they actually become more pronounced as the therapy continues. So he's like a weaker version of Nola.
Gotcha. Well, so it really then goes to, like the therapy itself seems to bring this out in people, but Nola is just mentally stronger, or her emotions are so strong that it causes that. I mean, I'm very fascinated by the mind's effect on the body. Like, hey, this might be like kind of gross, but like when I'm stressed out, I get like really bad canker sores in my mouth.
Oh yeah, for sure. The physical manifestation of anxiety, repression, stress, all that kind of stuff. I have that too. I actually have like an escalating. Yeah, I guess I have like different levels that I associate with, because I have that too.
Well, just so you know, and listeners, I know it's a common thing. Well, not common, but like people have it. The best solution for that, they say, is warm salt water. But you actually want to get alum. It's in the spice aisle of your grocery store, and it's used to pickle cucumbers. You just put a little bit of it on your canker sore for like a minute. Don't swallow it because it's horrible and bad for you. But it dries out the canker sore, and you should be good in a day or two. Just some helpful tidbits. But yeah, no, so I'm super into that. And so like I was never bored in this movie because I was so... Once you realize like what's going on and how the brood are, react to her rage and they mirror like what she's feeling, it's just, it's so fascinating. Even on a rewatch, like I don't think it's a movie where like you pick up on more things the more you watch it. I think, like you said, it's a very straightforward film. But it's so fascinating to me.
I like the fact, too, that it's not the story of a vengeful woman who's sending these creatures out to murder people that she feels have treated her badly. Like, Nola has no idea what she's doing. Like, she thinks that she's working through her shit, and she's accidentally murdering people. Like, that is crazy.
Well, okay, so.
Well, okay, yeah, until... Well, I mean, this is a point of contention. Like, you could argue how much does she know, or when does she know when she knows?
I don't think... Well, okay. So let's dive into this aspect then, because I think this is probably the biggest conversation we have to have about this movie in terms of its themes. And in our Wicker Man episode, you mentioned, when we were talking about misogyny, and we were having a film coming up, talking about, like, a director was going through personal stuff, and it shows in his work. I'm assuming it's this movie.
Yes, it was this movie that I was referencing.
Would you like to tell me what was going on with David Cronenberg?
Okay, so I don't know any more details than what you can find on the Wikipedia page, but
Right.
David Cronenberg routinely refers to this as one of his most personal films. He also calls it his Kramer versus Kramer, in case you want a sense of just how melodramatic and sometimes even straightforward dramatic this film is compared to what we would normally consider horror films to be.
Right.
But in real life, so David Cronenberg was going through a divorce and a custody battle for his daughter, and he then made this movie. So there have been accusations that this film is inherently misogynistic because our sympathies very much lie with Frank throughout a lot of the film. Mm-hmm. And even when we see Nola working through her stuff, she's obviously a very damaged person. She's not mentally fit. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a suggestion, of course, that she's been physically abusing their daughter, which is why Frank has to take her away from the institute at the very beginning of the film.
Right.
And then you get to the end, and it's like the solution to stop the madness and stop the murders is that the man has to literally strangle his wife to death. So
yeah,
there's a very, I think, simplistic reading where you could say, oh, well, Frank equals Cronenberg, and this is like what he wanted to do to his wife. I would suggest that is definitely a reading, but I think that's actually a bit of a mistaken reading. So.
I mean, it's reductive. It's very like on the surface, because I do feel bad for Nola in this movie because, again, with her backstory, but it also goes into saying, okay, so like, if you are abused, if you are damaged, sorry, not damaged, wrong phrase. But if you were abused as a child, are you doomed to, be like this when you're
cyclical
older?
Violence?
Yes, for sure. But I will confess, though, that when he strangled her, I was very much like, oh, this totally feels like this is what Cronenberg wanted to do to his wife. And I've never been in a custody battle, but I imagine, or a divorce, knock on wood. But you would imagine, like, I don't know what that feels like. And there's so much anger and rage going through something like that. So, if I imagine this movie was very therapeutic for him, no matter what the intention was of the reading to be made.
Yeah, I don't think it's wrong to suggest that, he's publicly admitted he was working shit out by making this movie, but I don't think that means that he wanted to murder his wife. And I think the reason that you would argue that, so the reason I said that I wouldn't agree with that is because it's just because Frank is our protagonist doesn't mean I think that we necessarily relate to him. To me, Frank is a prototypical Canadian male protagonist in the way that he's actually kind of ineffectual. He's a little bit impotent. So he's presented as constantly being late for things. He's not on the ball. He's behind in his building construction. He's missing meetings at Candace's school, as the teacher reminds him. So he's it's not that he's a bad guy, but he's actually he's not a great guy either. And I would suggest that you're right, that because Nola is presented in a sympathetic light, really up until the end, it's kind of this is just a battle between two people who are maybe having a dysfunctional moment in their marriage, and it happens to turn into a horror showdown at the very end.
Well, and I think though, and we've gone through this before, how I gravitate more towards women, especially if they are somewhat villainous, but I feel like Nola is at least given an arc in this movie, which makes me like her more and relate to her more, even though I don't know shit about what she's going through. But Frank is so milquetoast, so boring.
And Art Hindle plays him that way too, right?
Yeah.
You're following this guy, but he's really oh God, he's so boring.
And granted, not as boring as little Cindy. I'm sorry, Cindy Hines, little Candace or Candy. But but that's the thing is when I read that Samantha Eggar had only filmed for 4 days on this movie, because I remembered her being in more of the movie, but she's really not.
But it's because she's such a fucking tour de force, right?
Yes.
She commands attention. And not just because, she's glammed up in that
she's beautiful
70s style. She's so fucking stunning. That hair is Farrah Fawcett realness.
I was it's Farrah Fawcett hair.
Every time we see her, she looks like she's an actress or a model at some kind of country retreat, and she's just working through a few things, right?
But here's the thing, though. I agree with you, but, and I mean this with every single bit of complimentary vibes that I can give it, her mouth and maybe her chin too have this kind of like villainous look to them. It's like tight, pursed, like her mouth is almost too small for her face almost. And it gives her that kind of like, not insidious, but just like a tiny bit of a sinister edge for me.
Interesting.
Like, the look of her is perfect for this role.
It's weird because I can't remember the first time that I saw this film. I imagine I probably watched it in some kind of Canadian film class back in university, but I have no recollection of the first time I saw it. So I can't remember a time where I didn't know what she was doing, which I would argue is the big difference between a first watch and a repeated watch is, you know, you go through all of the different therapy sessions knowing that every time she's having a fit against someone, you're like, that person's not long for this world.
And that's the thing, though. Like, her outbursts are the most captivating parts. Even the first one, which I don't... No, actually, no. This is when her mom dies. And when she's like, you know, Raglan's pretending to be her mom pretending to be Candace. And, you know, she's like, oh, a mother would never hurt her child. And she's like, really? She's, well, no. Sometimes they're bad mommies. Sometimes they're fucked up mommies. Oh, wow. It's so good. Like, you just don't want to take your eyes off the screen.
I mean, that's, I think, the power of... Well, you could argue it's the power of the villainous role, but also I think it's just she's so much more emotional and therefore so much more interesting, right? Like, it's not that Art Hindle's doing a bad job. It's just that Frank is meant to be level-headed. Like, he's literally just, he's trying to get through the fucking day. He's trying to make sure that his daughter doesn't wander off into the snowdrifts. Like,
he's also your audience surrogate, though, because, again, even though this is the real world we're in, it's a world where this psychoplasmic thing exists, and he has to be told, and thus we have to be told, what is going on in this movie.
Yeah. Which is actually why I love the opening of this film, because it really just kind of drops us in. Like,
it does.
He comes into an auditorium, he sits down, and then we just watch this super weird role-playing unfold between two men, one of whom is acting like a really severe father figure. The patient is speaking like a young child who self-identifies as a girl, and there's just this rapt audience of people, and you're thinking, is it a play? Is it some kind of weird, like, new agey thing? And then the wounds start to fester and grow, and he's getting more emotional. And you're like, what the fuck are we watching right now?
So obviously there's a suspension of disbelief with just the entire concept of psychoplasmics, but it's just, I buy into it, but it's just so weird because it's like, okay, this therapist, all he is doing is saying he is another person in this person's life. Not even really doing a very good job acting. He just is saying words. Saying, hey, look, it's me, mommy. It's Candace. Okay, hi. And the other people just like, there's no hypnosis, there's no nothing. It just happens. I thought that was so weird.
Okay, but I'm surprised at this point that you haven't brought up Est.
Okay, my only knowledge of Est is what I've seen on The Americans. All
right. Well, I did pull it up. So
yeah, no, by all means.
So Patreon listeners will know this because we briefly mentioned it on the episode of
Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile.
There we go. Yeah. So in The Americans, which is a great television series that ran for 6 seasons on FX and stars Matthew Rhys and Kerry Russell as Soviet-era spies in the 80s. Throughout a couple of the seasons, as Matthew Rhys's character is working through his shit, he goes to what is called EST, or Earnhardt Seminars Training, which was apparently very popular in the 70s through to the early 80s. But it's this idea that it's seminars where people get up in front of an audience of like-minded people and they role play what they want to happen in their lives. And it's, it's very much like you can change your life through the powers of transformation and personal responsibility and accountability and possibility. And yes, I'm reading the Wikipedia page, but a lot of people suggested, the shit is a cult and it's really not actually doing anything because it's just people getting up and
talking.
Talking about what they wish would happen or having the kinds of encounters that they wish they would have.
It really reminded me a lot of AA. Like, that's just what it looked like to me, without, like, the religious bent that AA has. Bent, maybe that's the wrong word, but, like, the religious angle, because AA, while has helped tons of people, kind of also comes across as kind of culty sometimes.
Oh, for sure. I mean, anything that becomes a bit of a regimented or even indoctrinated practice run by a group of people who, to a certain extent, are interested in improving your life, but can also be seen as potentially profiting off of it.
Right.
It has, just that little touch of cultishness.
For sure.
You start in the church basement, and then you move out to the desert where the Kool-Aid is.
Yeah, but I mean, like, so it makes sense. It's such a weird concept to me. But, like you said, the movie just drops in the middle of this world and just runs with it. And it isn't really until later that we really kind of learn what exactly is going, like, what this is.
I think one of the reasons that I like it is because this is more or less... This is a slow, deliberate introduction into something that's fantastical, but as you suggested, for the most part, this world is very realist. Like, this really is a separation drama between a husband and wife who don't really know each other, who are confronting the fact that the wife might have been abused or mistreated by her own parents, who are also divorced, who, they're like, everybody's just kind of working through some shit. And then we just happen to also have these little child monsters running around bludgeoning people to bloody death.
I was going to say this. So, like, the movie seems to take a stance on therapy in general, though, because you also have that man, I want to say it's Jan, even though it's spelled like Jan.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Who potentially got lymphoma from the psychoplasmics therapy.
Oh, I don't think it's meant to be potentially. I think it's meant to be this was an example of Dr. Raglan not doing a good job.
It's like, okay, he got lymphoma from the therapy, but then you have this, is Raglan like a mad scientist? He doesn't know what he's doing, just like Nola doesn't know what she's doing by, sending out this brood of dwarf things to go kill people?
I mean, you could argue that Dr. Raglan absolutely does not know what the fuck he's doing.
Clearly!
He clearly seems to think that he's helping people, and I don't think his intentions are nefarious.
No.
But he obviously does not have a control on what happens as a result of these sessions.
Well, so, and again, I'm totally like just guessing, shooting darts in the wind here, but I wonder if maybe Cronenberg and his wife went to couples counseling, and he was like, this is a crock of shit, because this movie doesn't seem to view therapy in a very positive light.
Okay, this is where I'm going to dip back into some Cronenberg stuff.
By all means.
So Cronenberg has, I don't know if you want to call it unhealthy, but he definitely has a fixation with scientists. So they appear in nearly all of his early films, starting with his very first feature, Shivers. So this is actually the third feature. So he did Shivers and then Rabid, and those are both on the low budget side, and they're kind of experiments that have gone terribly wrong. So like Mad Doctor Syndrome to the max. They're also, highly sexual, and they're like Contagious Origins kind of stuff. And then people credit The Brood as the start of a more mature phase in Cronenberg's oeuvre. And this is where we don't get so much a mad scientist as it's a more prominent role for the scientist or the doctor. In the other two films, they're very much like ancillary, secondary supporting characters. Like they barely exist. They're there to kind of kickstart shit. Mm-hmm. Here, Dr. Raglan is, to a certain extent, he's a bit of a voice of reason. He's the yin to Frank's yang, because he's authoritative, he's in control, he's actually powerful, all the things that Frank kind of isn't. So you could actually read them as like, two different versions of the same coin. And he kicks off a run of like-minded scientist roles, with the exception of Scanners, because Scanners like the odd one out. Mm-hmm. That continues through until we finally get into Cronenberg's mid-'80s and beyond oeuvre, which is when the scientist becomes the main character. So that's when you get like The Fly and Dead Ringers. So I don't know that Cronenberg doesn't like doctors, but I think he's absolutely fascinated by them, which also makes sense because he is a scholar. Like, he's very well educated.
Canadian scholar.
Shut up.
Actually, I love your fascination with Canada, which, I mean, because, you're Canadian, but because I was looking at an upcoming movie we have in a couple of weeks, and it was like, Canadian filmmaker, and I was like, God damn it. Like, he's tricking me and making me watch all these Canadian movies. I know.
I'm secretly slipping them in. You know why? Because I think sometimes people don't always know what is Canadian, but like, to me, like, my fascination with film, when I was really getting into it, it was the primary responsible like auteurs that I was latching onto was David Cronenberg and David Lynch. So I used to call them my two dads, my two Davids.
That's creepy. Can you imagine it?
Can you imagine how fucked up that house would be?
I was like, can you imagine like what that would be like if they were your two dads?
God.
Okay.
Dream. I live.
So let's talk about these dwarves.
Yes. Let's.
They are some of the creepiest things I have seen put on film in my life.
I agree. I thought that they were played by children.
Are they
Children
not?
with prosthetic masks. No, they're played by adults.
Oh, like little people?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's why I sent you that weird IMDb trivia of like what one of the guys, like, so one of the guys who plays the creatures, I think there was only 2 credited. He went on to play an Ewok in Return of the Jedi. Not surprising.
Yeah.
But he also played an Emperor Penguin in Batman Returns.
Yes.
To which I just say, like,
You do you, man.
the roles for, do we call them little people? Do we call them dwarves? Do we?
I thought little people was the PC term. But if I'm wrong, listeners, please politely tweet me. Totally fine.
We clearly don't know. So
I know it's
this
not
actor.
it's not the M word.
Okay. So this actor of short stature, you know, that what a weird career to have, right? Like it's not about your ability to emote or act. It's you're getting roles literally based on your height.
I mean,
so weird.
You know what? More good for him. Like,
Sure.
Good for him.
But sorry to derail that.
No.
The creatures, the creature design is really interesting. I love the alien autopsy sequence.
Well, all right, so yeah, you touched on it in the beginning. I just want to read out. So again, if for some reason you haven't seen this movie or didn't watch it, what are you doing? But this is kind of the breakdown of what these fuckers are. So they have irises but no retinas, so hence their black and white vision. They have a cleft lip, but it doesn't affect their palate. No teeth, but their gums are beak-like.
Yes.
And then here's the fun one. There's a collapsed fleshy sac between their shoulder blades with nutrients, what the doctor refers to as a gas tank. Once the hump material is completely assimilated, the creature starves to death or runs out of gas. And then, of course...
Quite literally.
They have no... Yeah, exactly. They have no sexual organs, and they also have no navel, which is the first clue that, these weren't born like through natural childbirth. They were created some other way. And up until the ending too, I thought that they were just appearing. Like they were just like appearing when she was upset.
Yeah.
But are we to believe then that they like drive their way somewhere to murder people? That's never made clear.
No. And that's actually one of the things that I kind of find so terrifying about them. Like the creature design, honestly, they look like children because they're legitimately outfitted in snowsuits.
Yeah, it looks
takes
like
place in the winter.
Village of the Damned with snowsuits and deformed faces. Like that's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah. Which is hilarious when you see that scene of them walking Cindy back to the Institute because she looks like one of them.
Yeah, she does. Which I mean, but she looks straight up like fucking Village of the Damned, like her hair and everything. Oh my god,
yes, so much so. Especially the shitty, terrible remake one with Christopher Reeve.
No, yeah, I mean more so. I mean, they look like that in the original too, but like they like really did it with the platinum hair in the remake.
But one of the things that I love about the way that they just seem to appear wherever their next victim is. I find that so terrifying.
No, it is.
The introduction is literally someone kicking open a locked milk and orange juice drawer as though they just apparated into...
That's possible. Well, obviously this movie didn't come out yet because this is 79, but it reminded me of Gremlins.
Yeah.
So I guess Gremlins reminds me of The Brood a bit, but no, yeah, that it's one of my favorite introductions, and it's so creepy. And it's like like they have like the drawer falls out, the silverware falls everywhere, then the milk carton falls, and
all these elements of domesticity fall and prey to these little villainous bitches.
Yes, down with the patriarchy. And then the grandma walks in, and she doesn't see this fucker hiding on top of her cabinet, which whatever, grandma, but. The way,
Well, she was sauced. She was already on her second whiskey.
Oh, dude! No, that was actually one of my favorite, that's really fucked up. Because you see this happen before Nola, basically says, my mother was a drunk and, she was abusing me. Is the grandma has, her, fucking double fashion of whiskey. And she goes to Candace and she's like, oh, let me go top myself off and then I'll help you play or I'll help you draw or something. And I'm like, bitch, like, this is your granddaughter.
It's my kind of babysitting.
Yeah. So then she runs in there and this thing just jumps on her. And that's actually kind of their main method of murder is they jump on people and then beat them with something, which this is probably the most brutal death for me is the grandma's.
Well, they don't seem to have a lot of physical strength, so I think they kind of need to, like, get on top of the person, and then, it's, like, brute force head wound. In this case, it's what? It's a meat smasher?
Yeah, it's a meat mallet, like, you use to tenderize meat, which... Yeah. Those are the ones where it's, like, one side of it's a flat, like a hammer, but the other side has, like, I don't know what to call them, but they're, like, cone-shaped, like, points, a bunch of them. So
right,
it hurts. I mean, I haven't hit myself with one, obviously, but like just touching it is really painful. Yeah, it's a brutal death, but not like the movie's not overtly gory, with the exception of the end. But this, she's getting hit over the head again and again and again with this fucking meat mallet. It's insane.
And it does feel like it's going on for a lengthy period of time because there's just so many whacks. Apparently, these were cut. So there were cuts made to the release of this film, both theatrically as well as on DVD. So most of the cuts pertain specifically to the Nola reveal at the end, where she's like biting into the sack.
Apparently the Criterion Blu-ray restored that.
Yes, and I think the Arrow released it as well.
I will touch on that in a bit, though, when we get there, because that actually plays into the reception of the film at the time.
Okay. But I do think that there was some additional criticism leveled at the disturbing amount of gore that we see when these people are getting their heads smashed, because it's always heads and it's always, mallets or items of domesticity, because once again, we are watching a melodrama with horrific elements.
Well, because, I mean, there aren't that many deaths in the movie. Like, so you got the grandma, which I think is the most brutal death. You get the dad, which is whatever.
Yeah,
the teacher's death, which isn't the most brutal. However, it is the most terrifying because it's in front of those kids.
Okay, so I had to text you immediately when I saw it because I had completely forgotten. I thought that it was after class, so it was just her alone. And then I was like, wait. Oh my God, she is surrounded by children. And these two fuckers just walk up to her and start beating her. And all of these kids are standing around watching, stunned, paralyzed with fear. Like, oh my gosh, I was just like, therapy for you. You get therapy. You get therapy. You get therapy.
No, it's so creepy. I mean, because also most of this movie takes place in the daylight, and I'm a huge fan of daylight horror. Yes. You can make me scared in the daylight, like, good for you. You're an effective horror film. But they walk in, they're in their fucking parkas, and it's, obviously as the viewer, you're like, girl, there's all these like deformed dwarves like sitting here in your room, like do something. And then there's that moment where she sees them, she turns around, she sees them, and they're just staring at her. And I want to see like 5 seconds of them just like, huh? And then they just fucking jump on her.
Well, and their faces are blank, right? Like, because they're almost like somnambulous, right? They don't have thoughts. They don't have feelings. They're literally dispassionate about this. It's like, well, it's a living. I got to make a job.
They're Nola's id, like her craziest desires, they enact them, but they just, for some reason, only do rage. I wonder what they would have done if there was like some kind of sexual scene in this movie, like where Nola was horny.
Yes. Okay. So that's what I actually find really interesting about the other interesting thing that I find about this is sort of circling back to these accusations of like misogyny and sexism and that kind of stuff. I love the idea that there's actually very little sexuality at play in this film. Like, this particular murder of the school teacher happens because Nola mistakenly misinterprets like, oh, I called my husband's house and this fucking school teacher answered, and what is that bitch doing there? Like, Nola, take a pill. Girl.
Which but I read that too as very much like, oh, I bet his wife like was a jealous woman.
Probably. I mean, she seems to have very strong emotions. So yeah. I mean, she's clearly in therapy because she needed someone to help her get a handle on stuff, not just because she's working through maybe some childhood repression about, was she or was she not abused.
Yeah. But I mean, that teacher's death is shocking, not only because, she's a nice character, and I liked her.
she was like in the wrong place at the wrong time. And she's just doing her job. And then these two little fuckers come in and just murder her dead.
And then, and like you said, there's that funny shot afterwards of the dwarves just walking with Candy down the street. Because when those parkas, they're like waddling almost. It's just really like, it's a funny, like a penguin, like a really funny visual.
Well, and it's also really visually striking because so much of this film is really, it's not desaturated, but the color scheme is very like tans and browns and taupes.
Yeah.
And so when you do see these creatures, they're always in these bright blue, bright red, and I think Candy is in yellow. So the sight of the three of them just walking down this empty barren road in these brightly colored winter parkas, it's so memorable and iconic to me.
Now, about this cunt, and when I say cunt, I don't mean Nola. I mean Candy. I wanted her to die. I was like, you are the most useless child. You know what? These people would be better off without you in their lives. You are a terrible little girl.
Wow.
She's terrible.
You were talking about a traumatized child.
I know.
Like, think about what she goes through over the course of this film.
I know. I had to keep telling myself that, but I was like, girl, you're catatonic. This entire movie.
Is. Which is why I love that this whole, like, the whole movie is really, it centers around protecting Candace. Like,
right.
Frank has to protect his daughter, and at the end of the day, Nola would rather see her daughter be murdered than let him have her. And then every time they flash back to this little girl, you're just thinking,
why? She's
just going to need so much therapy. She's going to end up in some institution in a couple of years.
It's like if you're watching a rom-com and you're like, there's three guys going after the main girl and like you don't like her and you're like, why the fuck do all these people like this girl? Like, she's not even that great.
Yeah. This girl grew up to be Britt Robertson.
Shit! Ugh. I was also kind of perplexed by the frequent, because there is some topless scenes in this movie at Candy's expense.
Oh, like child
yes! No,
tit?
Her nipples are shown at least twice in this movie, including not only in the bathtub, but in the end whenever the Brood are attacking her and they're like lifting her shirt up. And I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, I get it. It's a child. Like, it's not sexualized at all. But it's just like, why?
I mean
you don't have to answer. There's no why.
Well, you're not going to have a child in the bath with the top on.
Which makes sense, but then they do it again, not in the bathtub.
I mean, the final scene, I remember thinking, it almost looked like, okay, we've got a couple of takes. We're going to go with the one that looks most threatening. And I think it's an interesting choice that they intercut between Nola and Frank and Dr. Raglan and, Candace getting attacked. Because in some ways, it almost diffuses the tension.
Oh, I disagree. I 100% disagree.
You think so?
Okay, so, we're just going to go into the climax of this movie then, because it's the best part of the movie.
Okay.
I think maybe after they wake up, it's less tense, but I think okay. Setting it up again. So basically, Raglan, the Brood have Candy in this lodge, and they're just all in there, and she's sleeping there for some unknown fucking reason. Like, when he wakes her up, and she's
catatonic.
Like, whatever. So basically, the Raglan's like, look, I'm gonna go get your daughter, but you have to keep Nola calm, because if she's calm, the Brood will stay asleep, and I can get Candy and get out.
Yeah, that is some Michael Ironside level suicide mission right there.
But yeah,
so you pussy, you want to live forever?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's go fight the Brood.
So okay. But so you're intercutting them between which, okay, don't you wonder though, if Frank just wouldn't have gone to talk to Nola, they would have just left her alone. Right. Wouldn't that have solved the problem? Yeah. Because she's not going to know.
Don't talk to your wife that you're having marital problems with, who has come to this retreat to get her shit together.
And that's the other thing too. Why wouldn't Frank go get Candy and then Raglan go to Nola? Wouldn't that make more sense? I mean, again,
it would, but it doesn't work for the purposes of the film.
I know.
Well, because at the end of the day, like, because Raglan already knows what Nola is capable of, right?
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder if Raglan is mentally thinking, you know what? These two need to work their shit out.
Ooh, you know what? I'm going to subscribe to that therapy. I'm going to subscribe to that theory.
Good, because I made you an appointment for next Tuesday.
You're right. But no, okay, so But the way I like the way it works though, because so again, you are engrossed in this conversation between Frank and Nola even before her big reveal. And
because you realize this is the first time you've actually seen them interact the entire movie.
Yes. I mean, again, she's 4 days on set. She has had maybe 5 scenes before this. All of them are with Raglan. Maybe there's one with someone else, but I think they're all just her therapy sessions with Raglan.
Yeah,
but,
I think so.
So you've got, though, Raglan walking, tiptoeing through this cabin with the brood everywhere.
It's so tense. And there's so many of them. I kept thinking like, there's probably just 1 or 2 of them. He can, fight them off. He's Oliver Reed. He's a big guy. He's strong looking.
Yeah.
I counted. There's at least 6, maybe 8.
Oh, I thought there were more. I thought there were like a dozen. But okay, anyway. So
there's so many of them.
But that in and of itself, though, is very scary. And I'm a sucker for the silent stuff, like silent, sneaky things like that.
Oh, sure. It's the Scream 2 principle, man.
Yes. And yes. And then you're watching Frank and Nola talk, and it starts fine.
Yeah.
And
everything starts out okay. You're like, this is good. Just keep it this level.
And it's good. And then, of course, it's just her reveal. Obviously, shit's happening. And then she's really proud of her womb. She gives the birth. She licks the baby. And he looks disgusted. And then she has that... And then when you see it...
disgust you.
Yes! I sicken you. It's... so great. The delivery's perfect.
Oh my god, her delivery's everything. Everything. If you have not watched this movie, you have to watch it just for that scene alone. Not just for the reveal, because the reveal is fucking crazy, but Eggar's delivery of these lines, because she's becoming a villain, but she's also a protective mother, but she's there's a lot of interest, you can feel their relationship, it feels real, oh, this is just another one of those fucking things that you don't like about us in our relationship.
But to me, this is a good example of the editing in the film, though, because throughout all of this, you are cutting back and forth between Raglan walking through the cabin, sneaking over the brood, their conversation. Okay, she gets angry. Then the brood slowly start to wake up. There's the part when he wakes up Candy, and I think the brood, one of the children, dwarves that are a bed over, they sit up and just look at him. Yeah. And it's and then it cuts back. And it's
Michael Myers level shit there.
That's for me though, that keeps the tension going, and it's just really, really tense. And I mean, I edge of my seat, even though this is the 3rd time I'm watching this movie.
No, I like all of that stuff. It's after Raglan's been killed to death, and then Candace is standing with her back to the door, and they're punching through, and they're grabbing at her, and you're like, I'm pretty sure that they're not going to murder this young child.
I
guess part of it is just I appreciate that at the end of the day, the conflict has to come down to husband and wife battling it out for the custody of the child. That's what everything has been leading to. Protect Candy at all costs, and this battle of wills between them. But I think it was just because I don't have that level of investment in Candy's safety.
Well, so there is a part, it's the classic shot, whenever it punches through the wall and it grabs her shirt and she's screaming, and she screams. And I wrote in my notes, oh, thank God Candace screams. And then I put in all caps, personality. Which maybe is supposed to be a breaking point for the character. Maybe that's, okay, look, she's broken out of her catatonia and she's feeling things now because she's in actual life-threatening danger.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a cue to the audience, hey, this girl has basically said 2 lines of dialogue this entire movie, but now she's screaming for her life. Shit is real at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So, but I did want to backtrack, though, to the birthing scene and the editing, the cuts that had to happen. So basically, the scene of her licking the baby, that was her idea, apparently. She was like, oh, I watched something, and...
It's like an animal documentary, essentially.
Yeah, and she was like, all right, and apparently, by the way, the fetus is made up of stuffed condoms. So, here's the thing, though. So the censors didn't like that, so they had to cut around it, and it basically made it look like she had eaten the baby instead of just licked it. So, yes.
So silly.
So the theatrical cut, what people saw in theaters, it obviously you don't see her eat it, but because you don't see her lick it, you assume that she's eating it because you never see it again. So... 2 very notable critics hated this movie when it came out. One of them is Leonard Maltin. He gave it a bomb, that's capital B. And he goes, this is the line from his review, Egar eats her own afterbirth while midget clones, beat grandparents and lovely young schoolteachers to death with mallets. It's a big, wide, wonderful world we live in. Bomb.
See that? I love shit like that because it just proves to me that even really well-respected critics, and I'm sorry, like Leonard Maltin's still alive. He's doing great things out there.
Yeah,
I'm much like I prefer his daughter, to be honest. But
I do too. But I think that A just treated his opinions well because some of his opinions of older films, I'm like, what the fuck were you on?
What's like in this case, are you even watching the movie in question? Because they're not fucking clones.
Well, so...
And that's not her afterbirth.
Let's move on then.
That is the birth. Like...
I know, right? It's the actual birth. Also, if it was... the afterbirth is like the placenta, right?
Well, it's because... Yeah, which would not
people
make any
eat.
sense because there's no fucking umbilical cord. Like, there's a scene that
yeah.
literally says these things are birthed, but not in a conventional way.
I mean, this to me is though, like, you know, they watch this movie like in 1979 and they're thinking, oh, well, this is a smut film. Like, no one's going to watch this, so I'm just going to write whatever the fuck I want. Also, there's no internet, so what are they going to do? But let's move on to our good friend, Roger Ebert.
Jesus Christ.
Who gave this movie a 1 out of 4.
Which is his lowest rating, because he never goes zeros.
No, he does.
Does he?
He does. And I know that because he gave both Wolf Creek and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake 0 stars.
Oh, but I think those are like the most exceptionally rare. Like he...
Yeah, okay. Super, super rare. And then he also like changed it a little bit later to where like he would give 4 stars, but then he would also give a higher grade that was great film. I know, it's like you can just give it a 5-star, but whatever. So he called this movie a bore and disgusting in ways that are not entertaining, as opposed, for example, to the great disgusting moments in Alien or Dawn of the Dead, and even went as far as asking, are there really people who want to see reprehensible trash like this? Concluding with, I guess so, it's in its 2nd week.
As though what? A film that you disagree with should be out of theaters in a single week? I mean, again, different time period where films actually probably did leave theaters after a week if they were that unsuccessful. But
yeah,
I mean,
but it wasn't. People liked it because I mean, you know, that anyone that went to go see this, and you know, like obviously you didn't have 4,000 screens back in '79, but anyone that went to go see this, they are walking out talking about the end of this fucking movie.
Oh my God, yes, this is a quintessential example of. It almost doesn't matter what you think about the early parts of the film. Like, if you found it boring, if you were like, oh, the acting is a bit stilted, you're walking out of the theater talking about that fucking moment that she pulls back the robe and the lighting switches so that she almost gets halo-level lighting so that you can see everything. And she just, it's like an emergence of a cocoon, like coming out of a cocoon. Here she is in all of her goddamn glory.
I love when she like rips open the I mean, what are we calling it? Like a fetal sack? Yeah. And it's like, oh bitch, this ain't your first time at the rodeo. You've done this before, because she just tears into it.
Yeah. I know exactly where to bite. I know just how much to lick.
Oh, it's
I love a little blood on the thigh.
It's, I mean, oh, and her licking that baby. I was like, I hope that was like cherry flavored for her, because fake blood does not taste good.
Corn syrup. Ugh.
Yeah, but or like those blood capsules they sell at like Halloween stores. Blech, so gross.
Ew.
I had this is like not relevant, but I had a kid once give me a gummy bear. But it was a solo packaged gummy bear when I was in 1st grade. This is like a 5th grader, fucking douchebag. And I was on the school bus and I ate it, and it was a blood pack.
Ew, no.
I know. And so I literally had fake blood all over my mouth, all over my clothes. And the kid walks out and he's like, "Did you eat it?" And I was like, "Do you see my fucking face? Yes, I ate it." I didn't say that because I was in 1st grade. I didn't know what the fuck it was. But I was so embarrassed I almost cried. I know.
So out of curiosity, if you could have gone through psychosomatics and, you know, like develop some kind of projectile, what would it have been that would go after this kid?
Ooh, I guess a giant blood sack. Like, ooh, and it would have enveloped him and drowned him.
Almost like the Blob.
Oh, listener question. Hey, for anyone that's had trauma or bad experiences in their life, which all of us have, what is your psychosomatic or psychoplasmic personification of your rage or whatever? Do you get little dwarf people or do you get something else? Let us know. Send us a tweet. Send us an email to horrorquiz@gmail.com. But yeah, so... You know, yeah, woohoo, plug. So, but Nola is, you know, representative of what academics have deemed the monstrous feminine, which...
That's from Barbara Creed. Yep.
Yes. Do you want to expand? Because that's all I read about it.
I mean, basically, it's this So this is one of the critics who denounced this film for suggesting that Cronenberg is most interested in portraying a female as well as a mother. Like the horror of The Brood is a woman giving birth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and which is something that I would contrast with, and it's actually something that William Beard, the guy that I referenced in the Dead Ringers, that I've been casually referencing throughout most of this episode.
Right.
I'm not that smart. Most of this I got from him.
That's fine.
He suggests that this, I mean, it's not that it's not a valid reading. As always, if you can make the argument, it's worthwhile. But he suggests that it's not that the movie is suggesting that the act of giving birth or even her affection to her brood is monstrous, or at least not for the majority of the film. So Beard suggests that at the end of the film, when she does the reveal, at that point, she does truly become the villain of the piece.
Right.
But because she's still this woman that we've seen potentially be assaulted as a child, she's in this loveless marriage that's falling apart, she feels that her child being taken away from her is why she becomes murderous, right? Like, this is the first instance in the entire film where we actually see her direct her brood in rage to kill someone, and it's her daughter, and it's because she's so afraid of losing her child that she would rather murder Candace as opposed to let Frank have him. So, I mean, yes, you could say, oh, well, that's monstrous. Oh my God, a woman who would kill her own child as opposed to give it over to her husband.
But then I think it disregards any of the past trauma that she's experienced in her life, which is mental and physical abuse at the hands of her mother.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and there's also the interesting reading that Nola has actually always been this way. Like, as a child, she was also monstrous, if you want to put it in that way. Because there's another reading that her mother did not actually abuse her, and that just like Candace, she actually had these symptoms as a child. And this is her, to a certain extent, learning how to manifest them in a controlled environment.
Gotcha. Oh, man.
So, I mean, that's what I love about this movie is you could look at it and say, oh, it's a crazy lady who gives birth to little faceless things that go out and kill for her. But I think it belittles some of the emotional nuance and the depth. And, like, it's 92 minutes. And think about the kind of weird stuff that you can pull out of this.
I'm a big fan of the phrase, write what you know. And for Cronenberg to take what had to have been a traumatic experience for him, because again, like I said, I can't imagine divorce and or custody battle is pleasant.
Yeah. And
turning it into a horror movie so taking a real life horror and making it also like this kind of crazy batshit horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it works so well. Like, there's that personal stake in this movie that he has that think about it what you will, I mean, again, like, there are many ways you can read it, but that's what makes it work.
That, and I think his dedication to spending time with these characters. It's interesting because we don't actually know that much about them outside of the time that we're spending with them, but they all feel very real to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is, when you think about it, a little bit rare for a lot of horror movies.
Yeah, I mean, again, I do wish that I cared more about Frank and Candace a little bit. Like, I cared more about that teacher than I did about Frank and Candace in this movie.
Yeah. She's a little bit more, like, emotionally available in that way.
Well, and again, I have to check myself, though, because maybe it's just because she's a woman, and I find myself, again, normally caring more about women than I do about men.
Fair. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something for me and my therapist to discuss.
I mean, did you care about Dr. Raglan? Because he's an interesting, one could argue that Oliver Reed is doing a lot more performance-wise than Art Hindle.
He is. I don't know if I want to say that I cared about him, because, again, I found him kind of pretentious and kind of like, elitist, like dickish or something.
Right.
But I did find him the more interesting character over Frank.
And just so we're clear, he's a big old homo, right? With that assistant?
Oh, right. You had mentioned this. I didn't pick up on this. But I mean, I could see it. Maybe. Like, what? Was there anything specific?
It's just me reaching. I was like, oh, wow, this male assistant is putting in some long hours, and he sure seems available at his beck and call. Like,
I admittedly, I wasn't looking for it. And so when you mentioned that to me, it was the climax of the movie. And I was like, I didn't see that, but now I kind of wish I was looking for it, because then I might have some more to contribute to this conversation. But I mean, maybe, I don't know. They had like 2 scenes together.
Yeah. No, I mean, the assistant is not a character in this film.
No. But I mean, I guess you could say that, Raglan's kind of asexual because he doesn't have sex with anyone.
I mean, ain't nobody having sex with anybody.
No one.
This is a frigid, cruel, dread-filled, wintry movie.
Well, and that's the similarity though that I have with Dead Ringers is like, because I remarked during that discussion, like everything in this movie just feels so cold emotionally. And this movie does as well, except for the scenes with Nola, which they're red. They're not blue, they're red.
Well, but the other scenes are actually also not blue, just to clarify. There's a lot more organic, kind of back to nature-y stuff happening. Dead Ringers is probably closer to something like Shivers or Rabid in terms of a color scheme.
Oh, sorry. I don't mean literally red and blue. I meant if like the tone of the movie, like cold to me is the blue. It's like just very like blah. Okay. But like Nola's scenes are red, like fire, like rage. Like there's like genuine emotion, whereas I feel like in the rest of the movie, like there's not a lot of emotion on display. But yeah.
Well, I think, and that's why that climax pops so well, right? Because you're finally getting to a moment of crisis, and the emotions are coming out.
Yeah. Well, but but again, like all of Nola's scenes pretty much have a scene like that. It's just like the biggest one is that ending.
Mm-hmm. So, you want to play a game?
I do want to play a game. What kind of fucked up shit you got for me?
Well, I mean, technically, we could call them... The mini one was, like, what would you project? But I want you to tell me what your Brood sequel would be. So you're following Candace as a adult. What happens?
So first, I'm going to amend... So in that particular instance with this fucking blood packet, that would be my Brood thing. But I'm going to say it would be my actual Brood would be manifestations of things that made me happy as a child. So I would go with like, I would actually go further back and I would go with like miniature versions of Scooby-Doo characters. Ooh, Scooby-Doo villains. I would birth Scooby-Doo like villains. And they would go after people, but they'd be real. Like they wouldn't be like men in masks. Ooh, I love it. Yes.
I'm getting a Goosebumps live action vision in my head.
Yeah, but like by way of Cronenberg.
Oh, okay. Ooh. That shit is fucked up.
I know. So though, for a Brood sequel, the thing is though, you'd have to make it about Candy, and I don't give a fuck. You age her 15 years, 10 or 15 years.
Okay, yeah.
And you make her interesting, but you don't give her amnesia. That is my biggest fucking complaint with somebody. This is like, oh, she's like repressed it because it was so traumatizing, blah, blah, blah.
She has to go back to therapy to figure out what happened. Oh my God, it's just like her mom.
But then it kind of becomes like a Firestarter type thing though, like where it's like, oh, like maybe like people want to study her and like whatever. But like, does she do a Brood? Is that what she does? Or you give her a new power? Like, sure, she has her mom's like bump things, but maybe hers manifests in some other way that aren't, giving birth to these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you wanted to be boring, you would have her give birth to Brood things, because that would be the most obvious and painfully boring way to do it. But hopefully we would do it somewhere more interesting. But
yeah, make it like, this is your X-Men. Like, make it like Cronenberg's X-Men. Each Brood movie is going to be like a different power. Ability, like manifestation, whatever.
That's funny, because when you said that... Unfortunately, my mind immediately went to the forthcoming Dark Phoenix movie that they're putting out. I'm thinking about, like, maybe it's Candace fighting her interior desires to wreak revenge on someone. So she knows she's got the power, but she's
maybe it's her father.
Yeah.
If he's still alive, I don't know.
Give her dad something more meaningful to do.
Would you go for a remake of this movie?
No, absolutely not. I would not. To me, this is... I mean, I rated a 4 because I don't love the movie in terms of rewatchability, or like it's not one of my all-time favorites, but I can't like, if I found out that someone was remaking this film, I would be livid. It's like, stay away from my brood with a 10-foot pole.
I'm a firm 5 out of 5 on this one. This is like, I don't want to say one of my rare 5 out of 5s because I have quite a few of them. But in terms of rewatchability, or like, I think it's a movie where if I'm going to introduce someone to Cronenberg, I think this is a very palatable one to do, which is saying something considering what's involved. But it's an easy film to watch in the sense that it's not like heady. I don't know if that's the right word. But yeah, so I get it. And also it's a very much a product of its time. Like you just like, again, using this therapy with S and stuff. But which, by the way, I forgot to mention, apparently it's also considered very similar to, it's either Gestalt or Gestalt therapy. I think it's Gestalt. But, I mean, whatever. I'd fucking go see it. But I don't think that anyone's ever going to remake The Brood.
Well, it's interesting because, so the Soska sisters are coming out with their remake of Rabid sometime this year. I don't think that a timeline has been confirmed. But they are on the record of having interest in remaking Dead Ringers. Which I think I could honestly see a remake of Dead Ringers if you're doing it in a different way. Like, can you imagine female? Yeah, it's like
they make it women. Oh my god, if they did it themselves.
But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't envy anyone trying to remake a Cronenberg film. I think one of the reasons I like this film is it's actually quite reflective of a lot of his other films. But you're right that it is a bit more of an easier introduction because it's not super crazy body horror until that end, and the sort of muted emotional, like the lack of emotionality, you know, the fixation with male impotence, you know, doctors, weird science, all that kind of stuff. Like, these are really things that he's interested in all the way through to Existence.
Yeah.
And then, well, after that he goes very Hollywood and it all gets very boring, but
which we discussed in Dead Ringer, so...
Yes.
I know. All right, so quickly, what is your brood manifestation?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, fucker.
I never actually think of answers to my own questions. You know what? I'm going to do like a poison ivy-esque kind of thing.
Ooh.
So, like a manifestation with plants and vegetation and that kind of stuff.
I love that. Like you have like, it's like a killer vines. It's like a mix of like the ruins and shit. My favorite elements. Well, I guess plants aren't really an element, but yeah, I'm a sucker for like plant or water themed like superpowers. So I'm into that.
Cool. I'm interested to hear what other people think of this film. If you are not a big Cronenberg fan, is this something that you took a chance on and you liked, or is it just kind of more of the same? I know a lot of people love Agar. Like,
she's great.
She's amazing.
Queer icon for life.
Jeez. Oh, man. The hair alone.
Yes, the hair.
But I love a 70s hair. Give me 70s hair on ladies and give me flared pants on men.
No, 100%. I'm way more into 70s fashion than I am into 80s fashion.
Oh, God. Oh, yes. Fuck 80s fashion.
I know.
But I mean, fuck 90s fashion more. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I would live in the Brady Bunch movies. It'd be great. So yeah, no, let us know what you think about this movie, especially if it was your first time watching it. If you've seen this movie before, like, you can tell us. But I'm really intrigued because, again, I feel like we have a younger listener base for the most part. Not everyone. Like, I know that's not true. But for the youngins, I want to know, if this is your first time watching it, what did you think of this movie? Because, again, I know the younger ones sometimes haven't seen a lot of the older films, which is fine, which is what we're trying to do by discussing older films on this podcast. But yeah, let us know, because this is a kooky movie.
This is actually, I think, the second oldest film that we've covered, too.
Yeah, Daughters of Darkness is the oldest.
We'll have to rectify that. We have to do a few more classics, so.
Yeah, we'll do a few more classics, but we'll space them out.
All right, into the housekeeping.
So yeah, that'll wrap up The Brood for us. And before we announce what we're covering next week, if you want to reach us on Twitter, you can reach me at Traced Thurman.
And I'm at B Stole My Remote. That's the letter B.
But if you're tweeting about us, please use the hashtag HorrorQueers in your tweets, or you can email us at horrorqueers@gmail.com. We will be doing mailbag episodes now, so please send us emails. It's going to be great. If you have 2 seconds, please head on over to iTunes and leave us a star rating, or if you have a little bit longer, leave us a review. And of course, if you like what you've listened to and want even more content, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/horrorqueers, where you can sign up for exclusive bonus episodes and mini-sodes each month. Now, the bonus content for May, I believe we've got, we do have an episode on Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, the Zac Efron Ted Bundy movie. Sure. And we've also got an episode on Netflix's The Perfection coming out very, very soon. Joe, what are we covering next week?
So, as I mentioned / threatened, we are sticking with a little bit of CanCon, so we're doing a Canadian co-production of Bruce LaBruce's Otto, or Up with Dead People. So we are swinging a gay zombie film into the mix just in time for the end of Zombie Awareness Month. Yeah,
whatever. I've never seen this
might
movie.
Have been something that Megan Navarro made up. So
yeah, Megan Navarro, if you're listening, thanks for that. But yeah, she said it was something about Zombie Month or whatever on Twitter. So we're going to go with it because it drops on May 29th. This apparently is going to be a very sexual movie. I've never seen it.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen it?
I have not, but I know Bruce LaBruce.
Okay. It is streaming on Amazon, and that is how I plan on watching it because the Blu-ray was $40, and I am not paying $40 for a gay zombie movie that I have not seen.
It's going to fuck you up.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So, on that note, we can cross out The Brood.
Yes, and cross out horror queers.
This episode was brought to you by the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network, delivering your weekly horror podcast fix. To find more episodes of this show and others, please visit bloodydisgusting.com/podcast network.
Get in, losers. This is the Lady Killers, a Feminine Rage podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Sammy.
I'm Rocco.
And I'm May. Our podcast is a tribute to the female-identifying killers in horror and more.
Each episode will feature us, your Supreme Court of female murderers, discussing our favorite lady killers, from your Julias and Jennifers to your Carries and Christines.
We'll tell her story, decide if it's good for her horror, and answer the most important question of all: would we die for her?
Join us on Thursdays as we pull on our sweaters, snatch our ice picks, sharpen our scissors, and honor the lady killers who live on the silver screen.
No boys were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Yet.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.